So, welcome to another Conveyancing Matters show. Today, we've got another guest. So, welcome Darren Parfitt from Prosperity Insurance.
Welcome to Conveyancing Matters with Lorraine and Stu. Join us for a chat about all things property.
Today, we're going to have a quick discussion about indemnity policies. It's something that us lawyers use probably almost on a daily basis now. So we thought it would be a good topic to discuss. So Darren, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about yourself firstly, and then a bit about Prosperity.
Yeah, of course, no worries. Well, firstly, hello and welcome to anyone joining. So my name is Darren Parfitt. I'm the Business Development Manager here for Prosperity Insurance. Prosperity Insurance actually covers three main types of insurances, and I'll just quickly go through those before we get to the conveyancing indemnity. We do ATE insurance, after the event insurance. We cover things like personal injury, clinical negligence, that type of thing. We also very briefly, or very quickly actually, going to be introducing a probate insurance policy as well. So as a company, we're expanding, we're growing, we're trying to add new products. What we're obviously talking about today is the title indemnity insurance for conveyancing transactions. That's my section of the business, and hopefully I will class myself as an expert on that, but we'll see. So I'm sort of looking to introduce our services to conveyancers in and around the UK, and seeing how we can help streamline your insurance process and help you with the tricky ones.
Okay, cool. So how did you personally get into indemnity insurance? What was your sort of road into this as your future career?
Well, I've always worked in property, to be honest. So I started off as an estate agent, and always loved property for my sins. Don't know why. So I worked in an estate agency. Then I moved into a probate company, dealing with probate matters. And part of that was house insurance. We provided house insurance. And I've always found the insurance side really fascinating. It's a bit of a minefield, to be honest with you. It's a huge learning curve, but I always found it quite fascinating. And that's when I saw the job come up for Prosperity Insurance. Wanted to work in the property side still, which I can do for the conveyancing side. And indemnity insurance is one that I've always been a little bit intrigued with. So went for the interview, got the job, really learning as I'm going as well. Everything's still a learning curve. You can never, ever stop learning new things. But yeah, really, really enjoying it. And that's how I got into it. I've just always been in property.
Okay, cool. So if we cut to sort of having a bit of chat about policies and what we do on a day-to-day basis. So I think certainly from maybe an estate agent's point of view, and with your background, it would be really helpful actually to comment on this. I think everyone kind of feels that maybe ordering an indemnity policy is a bit of a magic wand to making sure everything's okay. And, I wonder how much attention some people pay to, looking at the special conditions within the policy. So do you come across that kind of innuendo that the policies just sort everything out by magic?
Yes and no, actually. It's a really tough question to answer because it depends on who you speak to. So I've been quite surprised. I always thought it was a little bit of a magic wand, to be completely honest with you, before I sort of was actually in the game. But a lot of people that I speak to, quite a few actually, have turned around and went, look, I don't do indemnity insurances. I'd rather rectify the problem myself. And then of course you've got your conveyancers that go, yes, I love an indemnity policy. My clients do. It just gets the transaction through. I think what the industry's focusing on at the moment is two things: quality and of course speed. The problem is that the general public, in my view, want speed. And how are we going to get things through quicker? How are we going to streamline everything? Indemnity insurance is a great way to do that, because of course, rather than rectifying the issue, which can be quite lengthy, you provide an insurance policy that covers against it and covers any losses against it. And that also obviously works towards the lender as well. It satisfies the lender's needs. Again, that can depend on the lender, of course, because they have their own rules and regulations over that. But yeah, it's a yes and no question really, because as I say, it really depends on who you speak to, and it's really interesting to see what the next batch, the next generation of conveyancers are going to lean towards. Are they going to lean towards the speed and go indemnity, or are they going to be taught the way that everyone in the past has been taught, and look, rectify the issue? It's the quality of service that we're providing. But yeah, to be honest with you, I really, really don't know the right answer to that question, because as I say, it really depends on the person. But it's a really good point actually, because from my perspective, doing the indemnity insurances, I can see different sides of the coin. I mean, Stuart, what do you think in terms of your side of it? Do you think it's a magic wand?
To a degree, it is.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, the issues are understanding what the policy is going to do and cover. And of course, albeit it might cover, a part of a defective title, it won't practically cover circumstances where maybe there is an issue. And I think one of the problems, particularly when we deal with our work referrers, estate agents in particular, and you mentioned a new breed of younger people maybe coming through into the industry, there is always that thought that an indemnity policy can be sought for any problem. We talk about defects in title, but it literally, I think there's a bit of an innuendo that you can just insure absolutely anything. And of course, that's not the case. And also, I think maybe outside of the legal industry, but in particular, there's maybe a lack of understanding that these policies are like any other insurance policy, in that there are conditions that need to be satisfied and that are attached, to that said policy. So whilst I think it's obviously it's a massive help, to us conveyancers. But equally, I think it does sometimes create its own problem when the lack of understanding creeps in, insofar as, you can't just insure absolutely anything. You can't indemnify, silly little things, So, it works both ways. And, from a point of view in terms of advising the client, whether you actually sort something out or whether you indemnify, I think you've actually got to take your client's instructions. You've got two clients. You've got the client you're acting for that might be moving in or moving out, and of course you've got a bank potentially as well that you've got to take into consideration. So you kind of need to explain to the client the problem, and then what you're looking to do to rectify it, and why you're going to insure it. There needs to be a good reason, i.e. it's something that maybe you can't rectify, or like you say, speed means that this is the best option.
And you know what? You're absolutely right. It's the lack of understanding, because I've been an estate agent, and I'll completely admit, as an estate agent, you don't know the whole process of conveyancing. And it seems that estate agents and conveyancers have a very, very volatile relationship. And I don't understand why it happens that way. We're all doing a job. We should be working together. And it's the estate agents can sometimes be the problem, as well as mortgage brokers and conveyancers. We can all be a problem at certain points, but it's the lack of understanding that, yes, that insurance policy will just fix whatever problem arises. It's just going to happen. But indemnity insurances aren't built for that. They're built for specific issues, and depends on the type of insurance you take, of also how long that insurance policy is going to be valid for, what the conditions are in that insurance policy, because it's not just a case of you take out an insurance policy, you're covered for life. There are conditions which you need to be aware of, and of course there are time constraints.
I mean, the devil's always in the detail, and it amazes me the simplistic view sometimes people have, that you just get a policy for this. Maybe if you're acting for a vendor, you've got less of a worry, but certainly if you're acting for a buyer, you really do need to evaluate that policy and report to the client, on the policy that you're going to accept on their behalf. So it is an important one, and sometimes I think maybe something that we overlook.
Yes, I completely agree. But as I say, we build the indemnity policies for that particular reason, and we're always adding new policies as well. You're always going to find new policies are going to crop up in particular problems arising. So there is, in a sense, a bit of a magic wand in terms of fixing a particular issue just by providing an insurance policy against it. But as I say, it cannot fix everything. It just can't.
So would there be any mistakes you think lawyers maybe make when they're picking a policy?
Mistakes, no. I think it's again the learning curve. It's understanding the policy that you're taking out as well. And conveyancers aren't insurers. We all know insurance documents. I know from doing it myself, they're a minefield. You read through, there's 20 pages, and you're like, wow, there's a lot here. But I think the biggest things just to be aware of is the conditions within a policy. Just make sure you're aware what you can and what you can't do. For instance, whatever happens, if you're going to make a claim, make sure the insurance company is aware every single step of the way, because not advising a particular problem will invalidate the insurance, or can invalidate the insurance. So just make sure you're always keeping your insurer up to date of what's going on. If you are going to get a claim, if there's any hint of getting a claim, or if there is a claim to be made, they need to be aware straight away. Also, there are certain conditions where things won't be covered. For instance, in some insurance policies, you'll find that by advising third parties that you've got a particular indemnity insurance may invalidate the
Really?
insurance. Absolutely, yeah. So, and there's in certain instances, of course, there'll be that case. In some, there's not. In some, there is. So just be aware. Make sure you read it. Make sure you advise your clients. Send the document on to your client as well. Just make sure that everyone's understood what's covered, what isn't covered.
Definitely. I think that's one of the probably biggest things, as lawyers, we should all do is look at that advice we're giving to a client, because at the end of the day, it's the advice we give to the client that's really key, and making sure that we're, making something again that's bespoke and in accordance with that policy, not maybe a standard template that applies to everything, because of course each policy is going to be different.
Yeah, and we don't know everything. As a conveyancer, you're taking an insurance policy out from a company. Ask that company a question. If you're unsure, just pop an email over, pop a phone call over. Make sure you're asking them what is covered, what isn't covered. Get it on an email, confirm it on an email if you want to. But just make sure you're aware of it, because as I say, that one thing that we overlook can cause a problem, can make the difference. But as I say, most insurance policies are built for no really special conditions, for the standard conditions that you'll find in any insurance policies. Most of them are okay. You just got to make sure that what company you're taking it out, what insurance policy you're taking, you just make sure you read it. Even if you think, I've taken this one out before, I know what it says, you never know, it might be updated and you haven't been made aware of it. So just make sure you read it.
Okay, so what, for example, there would be maybe the most popular indemnity policies that people take out?
I think we've got two main policies that we get, which is most popular. Lack of building regulations is one, indemnity insurance, and also no searches are coming up quite a lot at the moment. So no search buyer, no search lender. It's quite surprising how many buyers now will forego that search. And again, that just comes back to, in my view, the speed. They want it done. Especially a lot of investors, they just want to get it done and indemnify it against it. I mean, I'd always recommend it if that's what you want to do. Yes, go forward. But searches are so important to do. You just never know what can crop up. And again, not every insurance policy will cover the small particular things within a search that could come up and crop up. So again, always make sure you read the document. Always make sure that you are absolutely aware of the risks associated with not taking out an indemnity policy if you're going to go for a no search. And again, a lot of lenders won't accept it either. Anyway, to be honest with you, if you're not going to go for a search, they're either going to want an indemnity policy or they're not. And if they're not, you're forced to do a search. So.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's interesting you bring up the no search indemnity, because I would agree with you. I've seen more and more of these, and it seems to be, again, a default position for people to recommend. But I always think in terms of the searches, that's almost one where you need to be really explicit to your client as to what's going to be covered. Yes, maybe a financial loss, if you can justify it, of course, could be covered. But what about the practical situation that you'll find yourself in, maybe without having the information that you would have had if you had the searches? So I do, again, think it's one of those, it's an easy answer, isn't it, to say, oh, indemnify this, indemnify that, maybe, as opposed to maybe the lack of the building regs, which would maybe be a bit more black and white in terms of the advice, again, that you give to the client.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I do certainly recall, sort of absolutely years ago, when we first started looking at policies, certainly, planning and building regs seemed at that point to be the most popular. Of course, now there's such a vast range of policies that it's difficult to say from this end. But
you're absolutely right. Chancel repair is another one that comes up, which I still find really strange, because in this day and age, it's such an old time restriction you get on a title, a chancel repair. But I always think of the case about 30 years ago. I think it was a Wallbank case. A couple had a farm and they got hit with around a £240,000 bill for repairs for the local church. They knew nothing about it. So of course, when they went through the purchase of it, the conveyancer didn't flag it to them. They knew nothing about the clause that was in their title at all. So and they ended up having to pay it. They had to sell their farm. I think they lost half of their money, of their income on that. So it's so important to make sure that A, you're telling your client the right thing, B, you're taking out the right steps for it, whether that is to rectify the issue on that title or to indemnify it. And also remember to advise your client that most insurance policies, especially ours, they're covered for the lifetime of the property, not just for that transaction.
Yeah.
So when you go to sell the property thereon, the insurance policy is still valid for the next buyer. And I think sometimes as well, what we see is a lot of duplicate buys, in the sense of certain conveyancers will buy a policy and then we'll see the property being sold again, and another conveyancer's in with it and they're buying another policy. We don't actually need to do that. So it's important to be aware of that case as well.
Yeah. I think a lot of clients don't remember that. I think sometimes it's an answer to get your transaction pushed through, but of course once you've got the property, you kind of forget about those issues. Perhaps if it's something that may be unfamiliar to them, maybe a defective lease, something like that, maybe it's not going to practically affect them, or they don't understand it. Maybe they forget they've got the policy, so therefore it never really gets passed on.
Yeah. I found that with my house that I bought. To be honest with you, the old owner forgot that they had an insurance policy for mining and mineral rights indemnity. I bought another policy for it because the solicitor asked me to. And I completely get that. When you're not used to buying properties, you're not used to these terminologies, you're not aware of it. But I think it's just important that a solicitor will ask a question: do you already have this? Do you know? And just make sure you're providing your client with all the best advice you possibly can. But as I say, for the policies that are provided, they are for the lifetime of the property. So it's always important to know that you don't need to buy 2 or 3 of the same policy. But again, like you said, people forget they have it.
So I think one of the things people might be really interested to know is, and I'm not sure whether you're going to have the answer to this, but sort of what percentage or number of claims that there might be each year. As certainly I can barely remember any, maybe one I think that I've ever dealt with where there's been a claim. So, are claims on these policies as minimal as maybe I would think they are?
Yes, it really short. Yes, they are. I've not come across a claim just yet. But it doesn't mean to say that there won't be. There's always going to be instances where there are going to be claims. I think some of the most popular claims are for lack of building regulations.
Really?
That we find, that they can be the sort of some of the most common claims that we've found anyway. But it's quite minimal that we get claims, which is a great thing. For us especially, but for the client as well, because it means that you're not coming across these issues after you've bought the property. But it's that one transaction, isn't it? And take that Wallbank case that I mentioned a moment ago. That one transaction where you don't take the policy out, that you just know there'll be an issue and there'll be a claim. So it's still so important to have them, satisfy the lender, satisfy your own needs, and obviously satisfy the advice you're giving your client, because let's face it, if there's a mistake that's been made, everyone's quick to sort of throw their arms up in the air and say, right, there's a mistake been made, who's to blame? And especially in this day and age, we just need to make sure everyone's covered, everyone's provided the best advice, and everyone is aware of what the risks are.
Yeah. So just sort of leading on for that question, are you aware of any circumstances where people have these products and, for example, a claim is bought and they're not paid out?
Not from my knowledge, no. Not at all. We all know house insurance and such like are really difficult to claim on. Life insurance is sometimes
that was exactly the road I was going down.
We all know that, but we don't do those type of policies because you have so many restrictions in those type of policies, whereas with indemnity policies, there's the type we do, there really isn't that many restrictions over it. It's just a simple case of make sure you tell us every single time that something's happened. That's sometimes one of the biggest problems, and I think sometimes where people don't claim because they've either just forgotten they've got that indemnity policy, so they don't claim on it, and they've got to try and deal with it themselves. And by trying to deal with it yourself, you can also invalidate
it. Ironically,
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so important that your client, as an owner, is aware of what you've done initially, and what you have initially, because down the line, if it's 5 years, because these policies can sometimes be claimed on 5-10 years later, 15, 20, they are still valid. That if you do deal with it yourselves because you forgot you've got the policy, that can invalidate it. So my partner, she loves spreadsheets. She's got spreadsheets for everything, and we just keep a folder and a spreadsheet on the computer of everything we've done with the house transaction. I wouldn't do that. I'm not that savvy, but she does. So if there is an issue, we'll always go through it first, make sure we know what's happened, we know what we got, and then move on from there. I know not everyone's like that, and not everyone can do that, but it's just so important, especially as a buyer, and also providing advice to your client. Just make sure you keep everything. and you try everything you can to make sure that you are aware of what you've got, what you've bought, and what your rights are.
Yeah, of course. Oh, brilliant. Well, look, I've really enjoyed this chat. I think just to finish off, tips for our lawyers out there that are looking to sort of solve their problems or wave that magic wand. I think from what we've discussed, definitely the devil's in the detail, looking at the conditions, that are within the policy.
Yes.
And I suppose, making sure that your, advice that you give the client, sending them a copy of the policy and sort of pointing out those conditions is absolutely key.
It's vital. It's absolutely vital. And that's everything to protect yourself. And as I say, if you're not sure of something, give your account manager a call. We're all here to help, and we can give you the best advice we possibly can.
Brilliant. That's great. Well, look, Darren, we'll wrap it up here. I'll put all your contact details, into the video at the end. So if any lawyers out there want to get in contact, they can always drop you an email, I assume.
Absolutely, yeah. Unfortunately for me, I'm always here. I'm joking. No, pop me an email. I'll always reply, and we can have a chat.
Brilliant. That's great. Well, thanks very much for your time.
No worries. Thanks, Stuart.
Take care.
Yeah, bye.